we're about 1 week out from the federal criminal arraignment that Trump did try to prevent. We all remember he was forced to sit silently in that Miami courtroom. Outside, cameras showed a very small crowd. The scene was nothing like what Trump had threatened for months. The talk of riots or unrest, or how the nation would not stand for his indictment. And I'll show you all that in this special report right now. We could also tell you that heading into the second arraignment, Trump posted the message, "See you in Miami," and he did some conservative media calling for protests, reinforcing ultimately how tiny his megaphone was on this score when it comes to summoning a giant crowd to protest a government proceeding.
Look, our country has to protest. We need strength at this point, and everyone's afraid to do anything. They're afraid to talk, and they have to go out and they have to protest peacefully.
Now, Miami police had security ready for a crowd that could top 50,000. And after what we all saw as an under-response to the January 6th gathering, that kind of prep could make sense. You prepare for the most or the worst. But one point that got less attention at last week's arraignment was the meager turnout of just about 500 people. No signs of militias or apparent hardliners like those who showed up for the criminal insurrection. The number of Trump supporters was sometimes literally dwarfed by the number of media present. You could see that in certain scenes. And there was talk of how Trump drew a fizzled response and really something that boiled down to a circus-like crowd, as the New York Times put it, including a Trump backer walking around and then another Trump critic carrying a pig head on an actual spike. The low turnout had MAGA supporters contemplating who among them might be federal agents. And you take this together now, we've all been through it, we've taken a breath, and you may say, okay, well, that's a standard outcome, even a less than newsworthy outcome. So what more is there to say? Well, there's a reason why this is our top story tonight and our special report, because there's a lot more behind the scenes. Donald Trump's failure to get anywhere near another January 6th action is not only a good thing for public safety and for the justice system. It is very much not a standard outcome that Donald Trump or his allies vowed to achieve. So it's actually worth noting how we got here, why this matters tonight, because even self-proclaimed serious people like Senator Lindsey Graham was out there vowing riots. Now, he was wrong about what would happen. He was also wrong to use this rhetoric to apparently threaten the justice system's operation with the fear of riots. Graham, a former military lawyer, is supposed to know better.
And I'll say this. If there's a prosecution of Donald Trump for mishandling classified information after the Clinton debacle, which you presided over and did a hell of a good job, there'll be riots in the streets.
It is 3 times Trump has tried to summon people to protest the justice system and failed to get any kind of large gathering, let alone another insurrection-type gathering. It's a glaring contrast to the people he brought to D.C. and infamously hurled at the Capitol in the actual sedition, which overran police, which was criminally effective at breaching the Capitol. And that crowd, if you're wondering about just the numbers, we checked, far larger than these gatherings we just touched on. It was about 10,000, including many vigilantes and now convicted criminals who were following the literal calls to overthrow that peaceful transfer of power and the election Trump lost. Trump demanded their attendance, and what he billed was a wild gathering that, fueled by election lies, his use of the debate stage to embrace the now convicted Proud Boys militia. Law enforcement and journalists found that all of what Trump did there, which is very similar to what he tried to do this time, in a very real way, it energized extremist groups. It operated and radicalized some political supporters and turned them into people willing to storm the Capitol. And that threat of violence does not function on its own. Trump has tried to summon the fear of another January 6th, quite literally to intimidate the very prosecutors now doing these cases, and to kind of try to corrupt the DOJ from the outside. I mentioned this once before on our show, but I want to bring this to our attention right now, thinking about those fizzled crowds, because we had that search at Mar-a-Lago. We didn't even know publicly then how bad it was and how much evidence was found at the time. It came out over time. But Trump, after that, dispatched an ally to pass along a secret back-channel message. Trump wanted Attorney General Garland to know people around the country were enraged by the search. And Trump added, according to a New York Times report, a kind of mafia-style threat to Garland. The country is on fire. What can I do to reduce the heat? Trump was suggesting that he had the power to do that he could either reduce the heat or, if Garland didn't play ball, increase the heat. Now, that may sound quite brazen for someone literally under investigation by DOJ for that very approach to attacking the Capitol and a kind of legal review over whether he was turning up the heat in a way that could be charged. But early on, remember, DOJ officials were actually afraid of even mentioning or probing Trump over that very Jan 6th attack. You're looking at that Washington Post report, which is new this week, a bombshell that showed there were fears there. And you take that all together, and you can see that while we can't read anyone's mind, the public pressure, the private back channeling, the very real recent trauma and lived history of that attack all combines to sort of potentially strengthen the hand of someone who should be just a citizen, just a subject of a probe, and now recently just a defendant. But you have Trump's secret pressure with the public attacks. That is the framework that is much larger than Trump. It is an increasingly authoritarian playbook trying to end America's rule of law that Trump has been leading across the wider Republican Party. Since DOJ has indicted now over 1,000 people in connection with January 6th, 570 convictions from guilty pleas. That's like no fight, no contest. And the defendants who tried their luck at trial are losing badly. 78 found guilty, convicted by a jury of their peers at trial. Now, there are still questions over whether that January 6th probe will go to the top. Will it reach the elites or the political lawyers and insiders who weren't physically on the ground that day? But the deterrence is already working because it is obvious that foot soldiers are getting busted and facing real prison time. Oath Keepers founder and January 6th leader Stuart Rhodes got 18 years for sedition. One of his co-conspirators got 12. Just today, we can update you with a report on the rioter who brutally tased an officer in those clashes, got over 12 years in prison. That's hard time and it's hard facts. And while Trump may try to lie or minimize the consequences of this or the awareness of this to his supporters, who do seem to hang on sometimes his every word, well, the word is still getting out in MAGA circles. To give you just one example, there's a lawyer for January 6 defendants, which is a pretty hardline group, warning publicly, if you want to demonstrate at these arraignments and other things, quote, you must proceed with caution. Garland wants throngs of arrests. Now, for context, I can mention that lawyer also is trying to spin the warning into an allegation that there's unjust prosecution at DOJ. But the core point and reality also comes through. Even an advocate and a defender of these January 6 defendants, and they have the right to counsel, is making the point that you will get arrested and you could get convicted. And if you get convicted, you will be in prison. Translation, do crime for Donald Trump, and you'll do time for Donald Trump. So this is our special report tonight because it fits into something that we have been covering and exploring here, the larger right-wing pressure on the U.S. to bend, sometimes in ways that are tricky or not technically criminal, or break with coups and crimes and racist voter suppression and other violent efforts to break democracy. Now, I try to be very careful with our words here. We're not comparing the threats we have here to the worst dictatorships ever in world history. But we are looking at what happens when political parties harden into semi-autocratic movements. For real. And we can tell you, and our experts and historians have told us, violence and propaganda are hallmarks of authoritarian movements. So the violence that you see threatened and that happened on the 6th and the propaganda that continues, this is part of how it works. But against that, most people assess their self-interest and figure out what will likely happen to them. And that includes people who believe propaganda or sign on to authoritarian violence as a political plan, as a kind of a movement they're affiliated with, but they still look at, are they going to end up in prison or not? Because if their team doesn't take over forever and install this would-be permanent government, well, they may actually have to have consequences. Consider that more than 1,000 criminal cases now, as mentioned in the January 6th probe, have had a, quote, real deterrent effect on those who might once have considered violence on behalf of Trump. That's how one expert on extremism explained this outcome to the New York Times recently. Now, Donald Trump's threat was in the open. It was building for a long time. You're watching the news. I bet you're old enough to remember people laughing it all off in 2015. Or people saying Trump's liberal critics were just exaggerating and overreacting in 2016. Or maybe you remember 2017 when people told us, some of them lectured, America has its guardrails for this. We'll get through it just fine. Or maybe you remember November 2020 when Trump lost and Biden won and Biden was declared president-elect and the Electoral College was moving forward and it was all normal. And people said, well, now this will end. Some Republicans like Mitch McConnell said Trump needed a little more time to absorb it so he didn't have to admit he lost, but this would end. In fact, that turned out to be one of our most dangerous periods because Donald Trump was then, as he was the whole time, as he is now, quite clearly serious about ending our democracy and our rule of law if he can. And worse, back then in 2021, back then, thousands of his supporters were serious with him. The message was clear because Donald Trump has long appealed clearly, publicly, and unapologetically to propaganda lies, hate, and violence. You hear the leader, but you also hear the crowd. The crowd, the hardcore pointy edge of the spear of that crowd, the vigilantes, they're in prison, as I showed you. The leader is on trial. Trump has not changed. Indeed, he's trying to call in the same plays against government proceedings in 2023 that he did in 2021, using similar threats against the system, against prosecutors. But the evidence shows something else. Some of those Trump supporters have changed under duress, but changed. They may still personally believe in Donald Trump and his message of violence, but in these several big moments I showed you, now that we're seeing them with the forest from the trees, they don't show up.